How's everybody doing today? Hope everyone's having a good day. Got a lot to go over today. I said a day like 12 times there. Sorry, I'm going to be a little quiet here. My wife is trying to sleep, but you'll definitely be able to hear me. I'm just going to try not to be super loud and emotional this one, but we do have a lot to go over. I'm going to wait a second, let some people jump in real quick. Alrighty. We got enough. Alright, so let's just get started here. So first thing I'm going to talk about is AMC. Just to expect here, like I said, what to expect real quick over the next couple weeks, month. So right now, like I said, on the box office, we're at 757 million domestic. It's very slow this quarter so far. I was hoping we'd be able to end a little more towards 1 billion by the end of this month. But like I said, next month should have a lot better numbers. But I expect us to more end around this number here that we did in 2023. So if we do an offering, like I said, it's not going to be a massive offering. It's just going to be like maybe 10 million shares. He only needs like 40, 50 million. Nothing crazy, just to cancel out some of this cash burn that we're going to have this quarter. He could also wait. And at that point, he can wait till the stock rebounds a little bit. Sorry. Because the box office does get a lot better on the next half of this year. So we all knew this quarter was going to be slow. They're going to keep the price down, like I told you guys, around $4.50 to $5, down to $3.50. They're going to keep it around that area as long as they can because they know this earnings is going to be slow. They don't want Adam Aaron to be able to raise more capital. And if he comes out with some very good news here on this earnings call, which I hope he does, I still think he's got some tricks up his sleeve for this earning call. So hopefully he has some new revenue coming out as well. But one of the things I did want to show you guys based on pre-sales and early tracking, Dune 2 is eyeing a box office start of 60 to 80 million in North America. So this movie is going to be massive. Like I said, if they would have had this movie last quarter, you definitely would have had a profitable quarter last quarter. So just wanted to let everybody know where that's at. But like I said, it could be 60, 80, could also soar to 90 million. Now, there's a lot of things I want to show you guys because, like I said, a lot of this stuff, it's not only unsustainable. I'm going to show you guys numbers that they're pushing around. I'm going to show you guys exemptions that they're giving them that can't keep going. And when these do end, it's just more and more added to the hill. Now, this mountain that we went over is now in the trillions and trillions and trillions. So you can only kick it so far so fast. Now, what they've done is they've all ran to the same hill of fool's gold. And they're all banking on AI. They're all banking on NVIDIA. And here's some things that are actually going to hurt NVIDIA. So one of the things that I showed you guys before with NVIDIA is how they cook the books, how they go ahead and they invest into these companies, but they do supply chain financing. Basically, what they give them for. Give me 1 second. All right, sorry about that. I had to get her medicine. All right, now back to this. So back to what we were talking about before here. So you have Microsoft, you have NVIDIA, you have the Mag 7, and a lot of these companies are just literally cooking the books. Now they're cooking the books together, and now it's becoming an issue. And this is one of the things you wanted to see and what I always told you guys. These guys they're gonna partner, and then they'll always turn on each other because greed always wins in the end. And they always got to have a little more, and that's the problem with this. Because before, the feds were always able to, contain it. They're always able to control bailouts and this and that. But you're at such a massive number now that they can't control it. So here's my question to you guys. What do you think happens when the feds can't print, they can't come up with enough programs to bail out the level of stealing that's happening? What do you think happens? It's got to stop. Eventually, you got to stop when the level is so high to where the feds are like, all right, we can't contain it. You guys can't contain it. or you need to let some kind of a crash happen and let these people die off. Now, one of the things that I thought was very interesting here with Microsoft is they're doing the same thing that nvidia does. I showed you guys CoreWeave and all those other companies that they say they invested in, but really all they did is, they gave them these cards. Like, it was basically supply chain financing. Well, here's what is going on over at Microsoft. So Microsoft, there's a company called OpenAI, and these guys are all together. We'll into this. So they said that they donated, invested $10 billion. But the problem is out of that $10 billion, only a fraction of it was cash. You have about $8 billion worth that is exchangeable with Microsoft services. Okay? So here's what happens is that company now, they say to everybody, they go out and they get an $100 billion evaluation. Okay? Now, this is what happens with startups is they go and they get their investors, and the higher your startup is you'll have little milestones you have to reach, okay, to unlock more and more and more and more of the cash. Well, what ends up happening is, let's say you get like $100 billion valuation. Well, your milestones, guess what? They're harder to accomplish. So that means it's harder for those startups to continuously get that funding. And eventually you can't hit those milestones because, number one, you told everybody you got $10 billion when you didn't. You got 1.3 or whatever it was. Like, it's not even close to what they say. But when suddenly other people think you have $10 billion cash on hand, you got Microsoft in, when instead you really only get a fraction of it in almost $8 billion. Now, this is what Microsoft is doing. This is how Microsoft is cooking the books. So they'll go into these startups and they do this. We'll give you billions and billions in Microsoft service exchanges. Go out and get massive evaluations, okay? Now, what we're going to do is whatever we give you guys on the $8 billion, let's say, on exchange worth, what we're going to do is we're going to put that as revenue for us. Okay, we're going to count that as revenue. We're going to count that as cloud segment revenue. Now imagine if I'm Microsoft and I do this to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 companies. Well, there's an extra $40 billion that's basically not really revenue. Now the problem that's going to happen to Microsoft and these guys, these companies, they're not going to reach. They don't have that much money. They don't have the money they thought. And then they got this up and up and up, and all of a sudden they bought this to get going. Well, they need additional funding. Well, they're not reaching their milestones. Well, guess what? They're not going to get that additional funding unlocked. And instead, the bankers, the creditors are going to come collect. And now you're going to have a worse company, and that 1.3 billion or 1 billion you got exchanged in cash, guess what? That goes really, really fast. And next thing you notice, that company goes under. But Microsoft doesn't give a fuck. They already counted it as an extra $8 billion in revenue. Do you see what I'm saying? So they're cooking the books with companies, shell companies, that are just going to go under because they cannot live up to the evaluations that they're getting, because they apparently tell people, hey, we got $10 billion invested from Microsoft. But they don't go into the specific terms of the deal. So again, a giant Ponzi scheme. Way for them to cook the books, just like NVIDIA's cooking their books. Well, now what's going on? So NVIDIA right now basically has, this giant monopoly going on. And that's how they're able to cook their books, because they can go ahead and just create false demand by investing their cards directly into these startups instead of giving them cash. And then they do the exact same type of thing. Well, now we can write this off, and it's a massive $2 billion fucking revenue when we didn't do it. Now there's a demand of the chips, even though we just donated it to them. And then when they go under, guess what? We'll just recollect our chips. Brilliant. So all these AI things, all this startup, it's just a giant Ponzi. Everybody just trying to capital off all of this, banking off everybody doing this. Well, if you guys look at this, they all actually invested together. They all kind of, you got Amazon, Google, NVIDIA. They all they'll package together, and then they also make shell companies, and guess what? Then they do series with each other and invest in each other to also gain more investors. Hey, look at all these people. Look at all these companies that are fucking doing it together. Well, look at Hugging Face. Look at Hugging Face is doing it too. Well, guess who owns Hugging Face? Google, Amazon, nvidia. So they create their own shell companies, get together, and they say to nvidia, hey, we want big cuts because you're the ones that are able to skyrocket the price, create the demand, get the extra income. So we want a high stake in this compared to you guys get the lower stake, but that's how we'll pay each other off, and everything's right with the world. So again, it's them creating their own demand. It's them telling people to invest in these companies when really they're not giving the amount of cash that they're saying. It's just a complete mess. And then they go ahead and use their shell companies. Oh, 10 people went over and invested in this company already. But it's the same fucking 10 people under nine different names. It's completely a joke. Well, now what happens is you have Microsoft that develops their own AI server gear to lessen reliance on NVIDIA. So in other words, all these things are going under. Maybe Microsoft, Google, these guys, they're not getting their money. They're not getting these things that they want to do together. Now they're breaking off, and now they're creating competition. And here's one of the things that I said is wrong with America is when you have no competition, these guys are able to do what NVIDIA is doing, and they're able to cook books, create demand, and then sit there and say, well, we can skyrocket prices. We can skyrocket prices because look at all the demand that's there, even though you're just selling them to yourself and making fake revenue. They're all running on fool's gold right now. They're all running to these hills full of fool's gold. They're running around trying to go to all these places saying it's real gold in these hills. There's real gold in these hills, but there's not. There's absolutely not. This is a ticking time bomb. But one of the things I want people to understand and see the timeline unfold, because none of this made sense to me before. If you've watched my channel, I kind of pieced this up one at a time, and it never made sense. And I was always like, why would they want to buy Credit Suisse China? And it's all coming together now. First thing, I want you guys to look at this. This was in March 21 of 2023. Now, I've told you guys since I've basically made my channel and Citadel got banned. Citadel's been trying to get every single loophole in the world to get into China's market. They've been trying every which way. They've been trying to get in through shell companies, all sorts of stuff. Well, of course, they end up getting in there and getting in there more and more deeper and deeper. Well, this all started happening over the last 7 months, okay? So there's your timeline. Over the last 8-9 months, Citadel got deeper and deeper into China. Suddenly, China has banned major institutional investors from selling stocks at an open or close and plan to track who is shorting, okay? So China's suddenly doing all these implementation bans, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? Why are they suddenly going so cracked down and getting in these new people, new regulators, the head of the guy? They sentenced that banker to life in prison. If he screws up in prison at all, it's instant execution. Like, they're not fucking around. And I'm sitting there looking around like, what's happening? Well, if you guys look at this as well, it kind of gets interesting. So they also banned, institutional people from borrowing institutional shares for shorting purposes. They've made a whole bunch of changes. Well, if you guys look here at the end, there's 2 people that just quit Citadel, and it's kind of interesting where these guys work. So China always talked about how their indexes and all this stuff was getting messed up, and the next thing you notice, they started talking about all these rules, these regulations. Their indexes were starting to bound up. They were starting to run back up. Well, read this. This just came out, and I just noticed this and saw this. Citadel Security Index arbitrage head. I am not even going to say the guy's name. Francisco, whatever. He leaves their Hong Kong unit of Citadel Securities. Another guy leaves, who's another high up in Hong Kong, and runs on arbitrage plays in Hong Kong's indexes. Oh, here you go. It's Big Sammy Boy. Big Sammy Boy is quant research lead for index arbitrage. So all these people that suddenly work high up in over in China for Citadel on their indexes, after they suddenly started looking into indexes, quit, and they're running. They're coming back home. They're literally pulling a Brett Harrison. We went in. We got China back for banning us. We got our fingers in there, and then we went ahead and we did the shit we got banned for as hard as we could to create more liquidity for Citadel. They're now catching us. You guys quit, come back to the United States. You're protected over here, no worries. China will release some bullshit. We might get fined, and that will be the end of it, but at least you guys are over here. You're safe. They'll ban us from their market again or whatever, but in the end of the day, we went and we just stole billions and billions and billions of dollars. But when you sit there and you watch the timeline and you look at the dates of all of this happening a month after apart, a month after apart, a month after apart, a week in between, and you sit there and then all of a sudden, next thing you notice, Citadel Securities is the only global bidder for Credit Suisse China. Why? And what did I tell you guys before? Citadel and these market makers send risk overseas. Did Citadel send all their risk overseas to China? To Credit Suisse? And now they're freaking out because if they can't fucking get this, if they don't get this bid, if they don't get all this, does stuff start to get exposed? Is Citadel in a lot of trouble right now? Like I said, if you sit there and you watch the events, the timelines unfold, it all starts to make sense. Why would they be the only global bidder on what everyone else in the world found toxic? These are nasty, toxic assets, but Ken Griffin wants them. Something to think about, guys. Now, speaking of other countries, China's making all of these drastic changes. Here's something that Dave Lauer showed me that would change everything in the United States. And to me, this should be implemented tomorrow. I mean, the fact that another country has this and we don't is just pathetic on the United States. So, if you read this, it says that actually over in Europe, on off exchanges, dark pool, internalization, the second it hits 8%, it gets capped. And all off exchange dark trading is suspended. Well, just to show you how big of a deal that is in the United States, off exchange just today for AMC, just to use that as an example, off exchange is 54.3% of volume. We've seen days where it gets to 65, 70. So you're talking about 70% off exchange volume. Now here's the thing. I know people, I don't care how you feel about the guy. Tony DeNaro was trying to do or set up a space call with Dougie Fresh, little old Dougie boy from Virtue. And he wanted to ask him questions. So, hey, Doug, you always do it with these shills that never ask you questions. So let me get you in a thing and let me ask you questions that people don't understand. And he wanted everybody to write him questions. And he told me to write him a lot of questions because we all know if I try to join this space called Dougie Fresh will never allow it. He's scared shitless of me. So I went ahead and sent Tony some of my questions. Now, I'm going to go ahead and read you guys off my questions just because, in case he doesn't get to it or, I just feel like these need to be asked because I would love to hear his opinion on it. And I try to word these to where a market maker, if he was asked these, he couldn't squirt around and be like, well, we didn't do that. So I don't know how or why they did that exactly. So let me go ahead and show you these questions here. So one of the first things that Doug talked about is the other day here. I don't know if you guys watch little Dougie boy on Twitter, but he likes to sometimes get in fights with retail. And somebody posted, and this is true, guys. Like, if they have assets to liabilities and they have way more assets than liabilities, you don't go, oh my God, they're in trouble. They're not in trouble if they have way more assets than liabilities. But here's the thing. One of the things that Dougie talked about was how. Hold on a second. Why is she texting me when she's upstairs? Ah, man. I'll do it in a little bit. Sorry. Now she got me off her train of thought here. What was Dougie just whining about? Oh yeah, the liabilities. So one of the things Dougie was talking about was shares sold not yet purchased, because he always talks about how retail focuses on 6 billion and shares sold not purchased, and then he was like, well, go look at JP Morgan and go look at, Citadel and all these other guys, and you're whining about, Virtue at 6 billion, but you don't know how to read a financial report because there's assets above it. And it's like, okay, fine. All right, let me ask you a question then here, Dougie, if that's the way you want to do this. Let's see you weasel out of this one. You guys sit there and you preach that supply and demand is what sets prices, okay? That's what sets prices, supply and demand, according to you. Not algorithms, not firms, not what Ken Griffin said, those 8 firms, how efficient it is that they could set prices. What you said is supply and demand sets prices. That's it. Well, let me ask you a question. If you can go ahead and, as market makers, if you look at every single bank and you look at bona fide market makers, all of you guys combined have hundreds and hundreds of billions in what you guys call fair market value. Okay? Well, that means that value currently isn't fair market value, so that number is a lot higher. So you guys combined have what, 300 billion, 400 billion, all of you 500 billion in shares sold not yet fucking purchased? If you have that many shares sold not yet purchased, how can you ever have real supply and demand? How much is 500 billion shares at what you guys say is fair value? How is that ever mean you actually have true price action? Answer that question. How can you ever have true price action when you have so many market makers that you have over 500 billion in shares sold not yet purchased? How can you sell something that isn't there in the name of what you call liquidity? What is liquidity to you? It's when you do what? What is liquidity to you, Doug? What's that mean? When you say I can make an unlimited liquidity, that means you can sell an IOU to somebody about a share that you can fill later. And I've already showed people the T6 and all the exemptions and all your CNS rules and your 30, all your bullshit that you can sit there and delay and not report. You can mismark shorts as longs. You can use that as a locate suddenly on something that you shouldn't have been able to do, which that's the thing that most people don't understand. When you guys sit there and mismark shares as longs, you suddenly use them as locates. And now you can fill other shorts. Or you can do plenty of things. You can now fill orders. You can now fill orders that you couldn't fill, and otherwise that would have led to FTDs. So by doing that, Doug, you hide true FTD totals. Now, my second question to you, and I know how you're going to try and weasel out of it, so I'm going to say what you'll say exactly word for word, and then I'm going to rephrase it to where you will be put right in your little place once again. All of you guys are trying to sue the feds, and you guys are bitching, whining, moaning about the CAT system. You guys are saying it's a breach of privacy for retail. You say that it's a breach of privacy for everyone, and it's not fair that the regulators have access to that information. But I don't know what I just did. Sorry about that. So let me ask you this question. You guys say that it's not fair for them to have that, but right now it's on self-reliance and it's on self-reporting. Now, how is it fair that you guys can do that when it's led to nothing but corruption, criminal charges, And fraud, when it's led to banks alone. This isn't counting you, Doug. This isn't counting Citadel. This isn't counting other market makers. This is just banks. When it's led to banks having 7,000 fines, 7,000 violations, how is that fair? How is that fair to retail? How is that less fair to retail than the people who regulate the stock market having the ability to see live data and actually regulate the stock market? So you on my second question, part of that question, sorry. Citadel got caught paying Goldman and paid a fine because they were one of the companies out there that were paying Goldman for that exact information. For other companies' trade information, retail information. So you guys are already doing that and beyond and paying small fines and then calling it a violation. Now, on top of that, we already learned that every time you sign an acceptance waiver and consent, it is a tax write-off. So you're not even paying that fine. So you're telling people that it's more fair that you get a tax write-off than regulators can see live data? Interesting. Now, going to other markets as well. Now, I know this doesn't start until 2026 because, of course, they always take years and years to implement rules that would actually make changes. But over in Europe, they're imposing a new rule that will put a general ban on payment for order flow. Of course, there'll be exceptions where member states where they practice payment for order flow already may allow investor firms under its jurisdiction to be exempt from the ban, provided that payment for order flow is only provided to clients in that state. So for everybody going, oh man, they can get around it until 2026. No, it's only if you direct it to people in your exact state. So that completely limits it. But as you guys are seeing, other countries are getting away from this. Other countries are waking up to short selling, all this crap. They're looking over and they're saying these guys are ruining every single country's economy. It's just not, you can't do it anymore. You just can't do it anymore. Now, here's something that I thought was very interesting. Jeff Bezos sold some more shares. He's now netted $8.5 billion in shares. He sold like 10 million shares here. And most people would be like, who cares? What's that mean? You know, maybe he's just doing this. Well, you also have Bill Gates selling. Zuckerberg sold. I showed you guys last week. Tommy Tuberville sold. Well, we all know Tommy's an insanely corrupt politician. Now, it's not like they're just selling. They're selling a lot of things at a time. It's like mass selling. So now I know people will be like, well, Jeff Bezos, if he here's what everyone says to me, and it's like, no, dude, you can't be that obvious. Well, if he knew that it was going to be at the top right now, wouldn't he sell even more? Wouldn't he sell like 40, 50%? Is that not the most obvious thing in the fucking world? If I sold 50% of my stuff and then suddenly it crashed, do you think I would not get in trouble? That would be the most easily market manipulation obvious thing in the fucking world. So no, he's not going to go, hey, I'm going to sell 50% because I know it's going to crash. He's going to go, no, I'm going to take an insanely large profit after I did it already in 2020. Now, you guys, I want you guys to see something because they go, how do these guys always know? It's obvious. Jerome Powell goes over and tells them. Now, one of the things I want you guys to remember in 2020, okay, go back, think of 2020. Think of this party, okay? There was a party at Jeff Bezos that Jerome Powell attended, and all these people had all these questions. Did you tell Jeff Bezos anything? Did you tell Jeff Bezos anything? Well, one of the things that's very interesting is there's a law out there, like Jerome Powell and his wife, they can't say anything up to anything that's illegal, obviously. But here's your gray area, and here's your proof it went down. This does not apply to their children. Okay? So that means Jerome Powell's son is exempt from this rule. Well, look at how interesting this is. When he went to that party, he didn't bring his wife. He brought his son. Huh. Why would he bring his kid? Oh, so he could go ahead and let Bezos know what's going on, and all of a sudden Bezos sold. And they're like, how did he know? And he's like, I didn't say anything. I'm not allowed to. I brought my kid. What did your kid happen to say? I don't know. Crazy, crazy, crazy. But when you see the scums, when you know the people that are criminals, you watch what they do. Now, one of the things I want you guys to see is, like I've been saying, there is no way to kick the cans that are coming, and the cans that are coming they're coming now. They're coming big, and they're coming hard. Sorry, that sounded kind of sexual. That's funny. Since 2010, debt to GDP ratios have increased for all G7 countries except Germany. In the United States, debt to GDP has gone up from 95% to 123% of GDP since 2010. In other words, we're spending way too much, and we're not making enough. And I don't care who you are. Eventually, that's a problem. I don't care whether you're a country and you can print. Okay, so now you're just leading to inflation and you're devaluing your dollar. So there's problems everywhere you go. So you can't just sit there and kick it down here because that leads to another can, that leads to another can. But guess what? They all lead back to the same mountain you call your country. So eventually that can of mountains is too big to kick. Well, I played this for you guys a month ago, but I want you to listen to something. You have to listen to this because I'm going to go ahead and break this down for you.
How do you assess the national debt?
We mostly try very hard not to comment on fiscal policy and instruct Congress on how to do their job when actually they have oversight over us.
But is the national debt a danger to the economy, in your view?
In the long run, the U.S. is on an unsustainable fiscal path. The U.S. federal government's on an unsustainable fiscal path, and that just means that the debt is growing faster than the economy.
I have the sense this worries you very much.
Over the long run, of course it does. We're borrowing from future generations.
We're borrowing for future generations to pay for all of our crimes now, but the problem is we're borrowing too much from future generations to ever catch up. Now, he talks about in the beginning of this that in 30 years from now, at the rate the United States is going at, the debts are projected to be $144 trillion. That's $1 million per household. So basically, he's looking at Jerome Powell like, what are you guys doing to stop any of this? And I showed you guys over the last couple months, they're spending and borrowing at hundreds of billions a week. They're still borrowing at a month. A week, sorry. We're getting to the point where we're going to borrow another $3 trillion this year. Well, what the hell are you going to do when you're at 37 trillion, 36 trillion? And guess what? I already showed you 8.2 trillion in debt is coming that needs to be renewed at the new rate, which means your interest rate is going to skyrocket the payments you pay on that interest. Well, you're already up to over $1 trillion on that interest payment. Well, guess what's going to happen when you have to renew $8.2 trillion worth of debt at a new rate and a very high rate compared to what it was? It's a big problem. It's a very big problem. You're adding hundreds and hundreds of billions of debt right back to that. And all of a sudden, what are you paying? 1.8, 1.9? And you're paying more on your debt than you're paying to Social Security, to everything. That is your number one expense, is your debt. Well, guess what? Your GDP is not going to be going up. Why? Because you've killed your middle class. You've killed your economy. You've killed everything. That means new companies aren't going to come. That means less taxes are going to come in. That means the people that have the money to tax are all the rich. Well, you're letting them get away with all the loopholes. Well, guess what? If you're going to have to say, well, we're going to have to tax you guys more, you're not going to make it in office. They're going to get you out and they're going to get in their new guys. Well, Guess what? The middle class no longer makes enough to support the country. Poor class doesn't make enough. And I already showed you the problem with the country. Your rich is now overtaking your middle class. Your middle class can no longer support your spending habit as a government, and you are now enslaving your people in debt and inflation to where they'll never get it back. And this is what I'm saying. Like, they sit there and act like nothing, it's not a big deal, but in the end of the day, you have people that are going to, again, lose their retirements because this crash is going to happen. So they've lost their entire 30, 40 years that they worked. Well, guess what? They also lost their retirement years. They lost their entire livelihood. They've everything they've ever worked for. Now, here's something that I said, because before I get back to what is going on, because somebody said that I was being too harsh here, and this gets to my point that I was just talking about. So I talk about how you can fix the economy very, very quickly. You can fix the corruption, and it's very simple. And if you ever see somebody talk about these certain things, that's who you vote for very quickly. I don't care if they're red. I don't care if they're blue. I don't give a fuck what they are. Number one, you destroy super PACs. Super PACs were the end of the United States. Dark money super PACs were the end of the United States. You used to only be able to donate $5,000 to a PAC. So that means that no matter if you were rich, no matter if you were poor, no matter if you were a company, no matter what you were, you could only donate $5,000 to that person's campaign. Or it was like 50,000. Sorry, it was like, it was like 5 or 50,000. I can't remember off the top of my head. Sorry, I have too many numbers going around my head. I'll have to check it out quick. But hold on, I think it's 5,000. Pretty sure it's 5. Well, it's 15,000. So, I mean, it goes up. It goes up, obviously, over time. So it's like 15,000. Okay, so basically right now you could only donate 15,000 to this PAC. Whether you would be rich, whether you'd be poor, whether you'd be a company, whether you would only have so much where you could possibly have an outcome on the election. Nobody has 15,000 is not going to be enough nowadays, to suddenly be like, all right, well, if this guy gets 15,000, I mean, obviously they need to change the numbers if they put this rule in, because the way that TV costs, I mean, you wouldn't have anybody even get ads on TV with that number, but, but you get my point. There's a limit. Well, right now you got PACs, and then you got what are called super PACs. Well, super PACs are unlimited, they're untraceable, and they're untrackable, and nobody knows, and they're unanimous. They're a unanimous donation that is untraceable, untrackable, and it is uncapped. So the second that they created these super PACs, thanks to Citizens United and all those good pieces of shit lobbyists, second super PACs were then, the government was no longer working for the people. The government instantly worked for the corporations who made the dark money donations to their super PACs. And if you don't believe me, here. Dark money topped $1 billion in 2020, largely boosting Democrats. $660 million went to Democrats. No, I'm not. No, anyone that goes, oh, you're a Democrat. No, I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck. The reason I bring this up is every single time that a president wins, he is backed by more dark money than the other person. I don't care if they're red. I don't care if they're blue. I've shown you over the last 4 elections, dark money has won every single time, and dark money will always win. You want to know who the next president is? Follow the dark money. They've already picked it for you. So back to this though. So you got Powell admitting, I showed you guys this last week, or like a couple weeks ago. It was like 2 weeks ago. So this isn't like a brand new interview. It was like 2 weeks ago, but still it's very recent, admitting that we can't do what we keep doing. Problem is what else do they have? We have deficits now everywhere. You have $1 trillion deficit over there in the Pentagon. We have deficits everywhere. Well, here's the thing. California's deficit is likely to rise 26% to 73 billion. As what have I been telling you guys? As new data shows, tax receipts fell short of earlier estimates. Oh, you mean you guys thought you were going to get more taxes than you did? You guys thought that you could go ahead and take every penny from every single one in the middle class, don't give them any more money, and you were going to make enough taxes? You thought that you guys could do mass layoffs, everybody's firing, companies going out of business? You thought you could crash the economy and you were going to get more taxes? You guys are giving more and more programs to people to not work, and you thought you were going to get more taxes? And you're going to see this more and more, and this is the problem. You always see the government tell you it's fine. They show you their estimated data, and they always overestimate the data, but they revise it 3 months later, and nobody cares. Because it's 3 months old news. No one gives a shit, and that's the problem with people nowadays, is if it's not something that's brand new in front of you that second, they don't care anymore. It's like it's irrelevant, and it's mind-blowing. But what happens when all of these deficits start to come back? Because what does this mean? This means you're going to have less government spending. This means you're going to have less teachers, government workers. I mean, this is a problem. Now, I've been talking about this black swan event here, and it's unstoppable. And I'm going to show you how unstoppable it is. And I'm going to show you. Everybody talked about, oh man, Evergrande, and I'm like, who gives a fuck? Who cares? Evergrande is nothing. If you look over to the commercial real estate here in the United States, that is the end of everything. This is going to be a bomb that nobody can stop. Now, Evergrande, and I think it's like Sunset or whatever the hell the other one was, over in China, those real estate development properties, they combined it for $500 billion. Who cares, right? You're like, holy shit. But in the United States, it was $24 billion in exposure. And people were freaking out over $24 billion in exposure. But you know, they had 3 years to figure out about the $24 billion in exposure. I'm sure it was taken care of over here in the United States. Well, over here in the United States, the exposure for commercial real estate is $929 billion, and it's all here in the United States. I'm going to say that number one more time. Everybody freaking out about Evergrande. I said it wasn't a big deal because it was $24 billion in exposure over here. This is $929 billion in exposure. Now, I want you guys to read this article here. It says distressed commercial real estate debt. Distressed commercial real estate debt outweighs the reserves at the 6 biggest U.S. banks. I'm going to say that one more time. Distressed commercial real estate debt outweighs reserves at the 6 biggest United States banks. Like I told you guys, this one will be the bomb that they cannot stop because it's unfucking stoppable. This is like pretend you're out on the ocean right now, okay? You're on an iceberg, and here's what everybody's gonna say. You don't think that they knew that this was coming? Yeah, of course they knew this was coming, and of course they tried to do everything they could do to help, prevent it, hedge for it, and get prepared for it. But guess what? If I'm on an iceberg in an ocean and I see a giant barge coming at me and it's coming straight for me, I mean, it's not turning. They can't stop. It's too big to stop in time, just like this is. The amount is too big to stop in time. So if I'm sitting there looking at me and this barge is coming at me, I only have limited supplies and tools. I can build whatever the hell I want. But when that thing hits my iceberg, I'm done. This thing is the size of $1 trillion. Imagine $1 trillion defaulting at once. And now watch this. It's not defaulting at the 6 biggest banks. what this talks about here, and I want to show you guys this because I've brought this up in my streams many times, and nobody ever talks about it. Nobody cares, and it's the biggest, most mind-blowing thing I've ever fucking seen. So what this talks about is it goes down here and it says, you know, hey, these guys used to have a certain amount of reserves on hand in case of these bad loans going. In case the bad loans go wrong, they have the reserves on hands. They can cover it. It's not a big deal. The FDIC doesn't even need to get involved. They can eventually get involved down the road and give them back money through the insurance over time. So it's no big deal. Nobody noticed. It gets slowly paid back and everything's okay. Well, when these banks don't have enough in their reserves to cover those losses, and the 6 biggest banks in the United States have that problem, and they need to start selling assets, what are they going to do instead? Margin call. Everything I told you guys we needed to see. We need these fuckers to get stressed out so bad, they have no choice but to margin call the people that owe them money. Well, guess what's happening? They're getting stressed out so fucking bad. They're going to eventually here need to margin call people. Now, one of the things that happened that, like I said, that nobody seems to care about. So if you guys look back here, and I told you guys right when COVID happened, they were like, hey, if we don't do this, banks are going to collapse. We're going to change reserve limits to 0. And I told you guys this. As announced on March, this is right on the Federal Reserve, Board of Federal Reserve. Again, if you guys want to read some of these things, read about this. Because this thing talks about how, because they lowered these reserve rates, these guys don't have the reserves on hands to cover their fucking debt. Oh no. Well, as I told you guys before, they lowered the reserve requirement ratios to 0. They used to have a requirement of 3%. They used to have a requirement of 10% on, low balance transaction. It was depending on what tranche it was in. Well, instead of having the 10% on the lower tranches, they went to 0. They went to 0. On having the higher rated ones, they went to, instead of having 3%, they lowered it to 0. And if you guys look, it's still in effect. It has yet to be ineffective. And I told you guys, I don't think they've stopped it. They haven't. They didn't even stop this. COVID is done. But the way that they let the banks get away with all this extra bullshit is still on. Why is it still going? How do you fix the United States? I will get to that in the end. But here's one of the things you can do. You can get your reserve limits corrected. Well, guess what, everybody? What did I tell you guys was going to finish the banks off? The endgame rules. Why? Because instead of it being 0%, it jumps to 30%. It jumps to 30% for JP Morgan. They don't have 30%. They don't have 30%. And that's a lot less money they're making while everybody's leaving the banking system. They're all going to money market funds. That's less deposits. That's less revenue. That's more and more and more pressure. That's more and more. And well, people are looking over here going, Bigums, well, how big of a deal was that? Let me show you. When they ended this 3 years ago, 3 years ago, it saved them $200 billion in reserve requirements. I've shown you guys over the last 3 years, banks have lent and lent and lent and lent, and they're at an all-time high in their lending. So guess how much that saved them now? Probably $500, $600, $700 billion in reserve requirements. So everybody looking over going, well, okay. So when the endgame rule comes into play, you guys, you have $700 billion for these banks that got pushed off and it's time to collect. You guys see what I'm saying? Everybody, I get they've been pushing it over here, but like I tell you every time, you push it over here and you push it under the same carpet. But eventually that pile of dirt is so fucking high. What are you going to do? What you used to do is the government called the feds would come in and they would take a vacuum and they would start sucking it all up, and they would try and contain the pile of dirt as best as they can. They would come over and then they'd put blankets over. Well, the problem is this pile has grown so high, the feds don't have enough blankets with how fast it's growing. The blankets are gone and their vacuums are full and they're clogged up, and they have to they're cleaning them out right now. You have trillions of dollars coming due. Well, here's the problem. If you're the feds, you can't bail out everybody, because guess what? What's the point then of having too big to fail? You're too big to fail because they'll bail you out. Well, you can't bail out all these other banks. They're not too big to fail. And that's what I told you guys. The Fed themselves had said, we need to let banks crash. We need to let some die. We're gonna save some, what we can, but we're not gonna save them all. We can't. He said I've showed you the clip of Powell word for word saying that. There will be a banking crisis this year, and they're not gonna stop it. They can't control it. And on top of that, what is happening? The reason they can't control it is all of this exposure, you guys. Look where it is. Middle to small banks. You have it's not, and this is my point. This is what I've been trying to explain to everybody. Because everyone thinks they're going to come out with some magic bailout, and they're not. It's not JP Morgan. It's not Bank of America. It's not these guys that they give a shit about. It's these smaller banks. It's these medium banks. It's these regional banks. Like I said, if you're in a credit union, make sure like I said, guys, no matter what bank type you're in, there is risk. Always ask your bank, how do they make their money? What do they make their money on? You can always ask a branch manager, what is the way that this, what do you guys mainly focus out of? Do you guys mainly focus out of building, commercial real estate? Do you guys mainly focus out of car sales? You can ask them the type of things that hey, well, what are the risks? Because you can ask them that. Nobody does, but you're allowed to go ask them. And I tell people, you should always ask a bank always know the risk. There are going to be credit unions attached to some of these. But you also have banks that I told you guys, like when people are like regional banks, like when I explained to you guys a small bank, I told you like a mom and pop bank. And I use my example in Rosemount. In Rosemount, I have a family bank. It's called the Toombs Family Bank. It's the Rosemount First Bank. This bank is not out there fucking up in derivatives. This bank isn't out there financing giant ass buildings. You know what I mean? You can obviously see a smaller type bank and go, okay, that bank they may probably give out a lot of car loans. So their biggest thing is if everyone defaults on their car loans, they give out a lot of local loans on home loans. That's what they do. That's their risk. So commercial real estate's not going to affect them. So that's the type of things you look for. But when you look at this, banks with less than $5 billion in assets, listen to this. Banks with less than $5 billion in assets have over $200 billion in exposure. What? Banks with $5 billion in assets have over $200 billion in exposure. Okay. You have banks with $5 to $10 billion have over $240 billion in exposure. Okay. So you're telling me banks that have under $10 billion in assets have over 240 billion, or I'm sorry, 440 billion in exposure, and they have 5 to 10 billion in assets. Now I'm going to show you something else next that's going to make it even more nerve-wracking. You guys can look 10 to 50, 50 to 100, or both around, 175, 150 billion. So it's and then it goes, lower and lower, but it's a big deal to where, like I said, you have 929 billion bomb blowing up in their fucking face. Well, this is what I want people to understand. And this is how I knew when Powell said We're going to let some of these guys die. When they announced that they're going to stop this on January 24th, the Federal Reserve Board announced they're going to end new loans and they're going to end the banking. We already told you, everyone thinks they're going to keep, oh no, they'll renew it last second. No, they won't. They're not gonna. It's done. This is how they try to contain it, because what Powell said is, we did some containing. This was their bailout. I want you guys to understand this was their potential small-time bailout, but it's not enough. If you look over here, they bailed these guys out $167 billion. Well, as I showed you, well, that will bail out some of the bigger regional banks that might crush some cities. So they'll bail those out, but they'll let the smaller and they'll let everyone else go down. So this will be their form of their bailout, but they're going to cut it out, cap it off, and go, okay, that's going to be what we're going to do. Those are going to be who we're going to save. You guys have 1 year to prepare. But the problem is with that, one, I want you guys to look at this chart before I get in. Well, no, I'll show you that. But the problem is with that is if you guys look, 2.7 trillion in commercial real estate, which I've shown you this number, is going to be due by 2027. But what this isn't showing you is what I showed you last time. In 2028, it goes up to 3.8. It's $1.4 trillion due. In 2028, you have 1.4 trillion. That's a lot higher than our 929 billion that they are like, what are we going to do? You have almost 4 trillion due in the next 3 years. 4 years, I mean. 4 trillion, you guys. What? And it's all over-evaluated. You're not stopping this. How do you stop 4 trillion? You don't. Like I told you, we're on an iceberg and that fucking barge is coming right at us and it's got 4 trillion pounds on it. We can make as many igloos as we want. It's going down, dude. Now, one of the things I want to show you guys, because you always want to look at numbers. Now, from borrowing on, I showed you guys, these guys are borrowing and they're living on credit cards. This is your cash and asset on those small commercial banks, okay? Here we are right here. We're at 445. Now, if you look at the assets, billion, sorry, I didn't say billion, billion. And if you look at their borrowing and how much they have owed and how much they've borrowed from this facility and other things and how much they owe, they have borrowed more than they have assets. Now, do you guys see the problem here? You've borrowed 100% of your assets. And you have, what did I just show you? 0 reserves. Now, what else did I just show you? Distressed commercial real estate debt outweighs reserves at the 6 biggest banks. Well, guess what it also outweighs? The reserves at all of the small ones. It outweighs all of the small's assets. Every asset they own is already owed, and it's all coming due. So it's all coming due. They don't have it. And all these people did what? They wrote ISDA contracts with the big banks. And now the big banks are in trouble and they're going to need to come knocking on these guys' door too. And they're going to need their money. So like I said, they're between a rock and a hard place. And the people that used to be able to bail them out, the feds, they're not able to bail them out at the level that they're stealing at, and it's all coming due. The cracks in your foundation, your walls are crumbling down. What are you going to do here? You're going to end up having to sell, and like I said, the only way to stimulate your country and your economy without having the risk of a civil war type thing, or people figuring out that you're destroying their lives and enslaving them through debt, is a type of stimulus or a MOAS that they deserved and that they earned, and you let them go ahead and squeeze up all the meme stocks and all these other things quick, and you re-stimulate your economy, and that's the only way you get it back. Because the only way to get your country and your economy back on track is to not create more money. It's to use the money you already created, stolen, and siphoned, and give it back to the country. And the only way to do that is through your squeezes and your MOAS, through your financial crime that you call a stock market. Because the government cannot do another stimulus, because as we showed you last time, that just ended up making the rich even richer. That doesn't help your problem, it actually hurts your problem. So back to this now. One of the things that I wanted to show you also, and we went over this the other day, but I didn't mention this specific bank. New York Community Bancorp is the only U.S. lender with more than $100 billion of total assets, with commercial real estate loans amounting to more than 300% of capital at the end of September. What the hell? How is that even allowed? 300%? Okay. So in other words, I told you guys this company was a ticking time bomb. Well, I didn't realize it was this big of a fucking ticking time bomb. So yeah, this one's good luck. But what else is happening too? And this is what I was talking about with the government and the problems they were having. Not only do you have less and less and less companies starting up, less and less companies because you have no middle class. You have nobody here to open new companies. They can't afford to. They're all broke. So you're getting less and less companies, less and less taxes, as we just went over. Well, one of the other things people are doing is they're waking up and they're getting smarter. They're not sitting there going public. I told you guys last year, public is getting less and less and less attractive. People are waking up to the fact that these corporations are just bullying them. And if they do even get successful, they end up losing it anyways to these corporations who just bash their company all of a sudden and go and attack them and do this and that and this and that. Well, more people are like, you know what, fuck it. I'm not even gonna go public. I'm not even gonna try and get big. I'm not gonna try and get massive. I'm gonna try and get big enough to where I can support myself, retire, and do these, do what I want to do. And that now is becoming more and more attractive to people than getting bullied by these fucking douchebag banks who just end up stealing your life's work anyways. Like I said, what does that mean? That means even less people now are gaining that capital to go and buy these real estate offices, to go and buy this. So now you're having more and more financial strain on a real estate office that is the size of $3.8 trillion. No big deal. Now, like I said, you suddenly have all these people talking about it, which, we've been talking about this for months, but all of a sudden it's all coming out now. Now you have systematic risk concerns grow among money managers as real estate woes cause terminals. Because not only do you have $929 billion due here now in the United States coming up, which was way, way more than what they estimated, which is what, like we went over earlier in this stream, seems to be the case. They always overestimate when it benefits them and underestimate when it benefits them as well. But they're always wrong. Always wrong. So these guys are looking over going, well, we have $929 billion over here, but you also have $500 billion going over there. So now you have a $1.4 trillion bomb going off in the global economy. And I don't know if you guys remember the other day, I posted that one German bank said, hey, we expect the next, financial real estate crisis to come really shortly. Well, this is what they're looking at. This is what they're talking about. This $1.4 trillion fucking bomb that's about to go off. Already went over that, but this was the problem here too, because like we went over with nvidia and all this stuff, you end up getting what we call stagflation, because when you have no competition, when you squeeze out your middle class, when you squeeze them out, that means competition's gone, which means that these other top people can now set prices and raise prices and raise prices. There's no competition, so they can go ahead and start charging more and more and more because, again, competition drives sales, drives prices down. It's always great for us when there's more competition. Well, when they start killing all the competition off, these guys will start price gouging, as you're seeing here. It just starts skyrocketing. This, this is going to lead to less and less and less of us spending, because you're going to see prices keep going up. Wages won't go up enough to keep up with it. And we already showed you inflation is actually going back up currently. So eventually you're going to have stagflation, because no one will be able to buy anything, but prices will still go up. So the United States, like I've shown you guys, we're on a path where that barge I was talking about, it's coming. You can see it in the distance. It's so close. It's stupid, and it's going to hit us so fucking hard. It's insane. Now, before I get to that one, I want you guys to listen to this. I don't care about. I get real mad when I get into this next sentence stuff, and I want this to spread more than anything in this entire stream. I fucking hate these pieces of shit. Alright, before we even get into this, JP Morgan says its trading venues are under investigation while still on probation for prior trading crimes. How many times can JP Morgan commit crimes while on probation? Have you ever been on probation before and went and did a felony, and then they said, don't worry about it, and then you were on probation and you went and did a second felony and a third felony and a fourth felony and a fifth felony, and you're on probation? I mean, this is insanity. They just got done rigging the precious metal market for 8 years. So these guys are sitting there getting violation under probation, and it doesn't even. What's the point of probation for these guys then? At this point, you like I said, this is insanity. I want you guys to read all this stuff here, but I want you guys to. This next part is what I want you guys to listen to. I want you guys to share this. Somebody, you can clip it. I don't care. Clip this part, make it a 3-minute video and 5-minute video. I don't care. There's a list of names that JP Morgan admitted to frequently visiting this island in the Virgin Island lawsuit. They knew about the cash transactions that were taken out, given to Jeffrey Epstein to pay for sex minor, all this stuff. Sex trafficking victims, all this stuff. When I showed you guys this a long time ago, I told you right away it was JP Morgan was their partner. It wasn't just like, oh man, it's just Joe Staley and he was this bad executive at the bank and he was hiding this records and hiding all this stuff from the bank and nobody could catch him because just Joe Staley, he was hiding it all, and it's impossible. It's impossible. Even if you have one guy on the inside, it's impossible for you to hide everything like they're claiming to do. Well, when the Virgin Islands were going to do a lot, when they were going to prosecute and go after JP Morgan for criminal offenses, Joe Biden instantly flew down there. That lady was instantly fired. A month or two later, they settled with those victims, and they settled with those victims for the exact things that the attorney was going to prosecute them for. So instead of actually going, hey, we're going to get legal trouble, they did acceptance, waiver, and consents, which tells me, and I want you guys to listen to this, JP Morgan not only banked for them, 14 executives visited the island. Now, this was according to the bank's own ledger. Their own ledger. The bank's own chart linked above in the 9th paragraph shows that the following 14 individuals, in addition to Staley, so there was 15 executives. Now we're making visits to Epstein's private residence while employed at the bank. Here's their names. All of these people highlighted: managing director, CEO of wealth management. Look at all these people. Paul Barrett, Mary Casey, John Duffy, it's women too. That's what's it's like, holy fuck. Joanna, David, all these, Paul Morris, all these people. According to the bank's own ledger, were making visits there. On top of that, if you read this inside of this, the bank knew about Epstein coming out, taking out cash withdrawals and using those to those miners, and they knew about it. Right here, they knew about it for 10 years. JP Morgan handled more than $5 million in outgoing cash transactions and ignoring its own policies with cash withdrawals. These ones were split into $40,000 and were paid to underage sexual assault victims in cash. They were all aware of it, and they did not stop. This article talks about not only did they know about it. Look at this. While evidence submitted to the court showed Staley was deeply involved in Epstein, the evidence is also overwhelming, and more than a dozen other bank personnel, including top executives, facilitated Epstein's ability to keep his sex trafficking of minor schemes alive. Why do you not know the names? Why do you not know what's going on? What did I just show you last week? Jeffrey Epstein victims are suing the FBI for doing cover-ups for large corporations like JP Morgan and politicians. Everybody, this came out a couple days ago. I want you guys to read this. I have linked it. But I told you guys this a long time ago. You can always... They can go ahead and take Jeffrey Epstein away, but JP Morgan's the one who they're allowing all the money to go through. If you can't have the money to do all the crimes, JP Morgan's basically your partner. They're enabling it. They've allowed it, and they knew about it. And guess what? You can replace a Jeffrey Epstein. You can't replace money funneling by a large institution. And what have I showed you? Every criminal organization, cartel, oligarchy, they use JP Morgan. Mafia, they use JP Morgan. Money launderers, they use JP Morgan. And at the same time, the Democrats controlled Virginia. They killed a bill without even hearing it that would limit how much money politicians can accept from campaign donors. So limiting that $1 billion in dark money didn't even make it to the table. So limiting the politicians from collecting $1 billion in dark money from donations didn't even make it to the table. Now, I just got 2 more things to show you guys, and I'm just kind of curious about everybody in the chat's opinion on this. So why we have deficits over here, why we have deficits over there, while people are struggling left and right. We now have a new way for them to help, they say, migrants, but they also have a system of fraud. If you read about these contracts, it gets up to $10,000 per migrant. They have no ID check. There's no fraud control. It also make migrants sign, they basically just make them sign a paper saying that I'm going to buy food and baby supplies with this money, and that's what I'll do with it. Okay. So now if I'm not doing ID checks and all this, how many times can somebody go there? So let's say I'm a criminal in Wall Street, somebody who, just like the last stimulus packages sent out to businesses, they went ahead and scammed those. They're going to go over here. They're going to go ahead and I'll sign an affidavit. I can lie and say anything. I don't have a social security. You don't have any way to track me. What are you going to do? Take my picture and then make me look through the database? No. What you're going to do is you're going to have more of these politicians, criminals, all these fuckers, bankers come dipping in this bullshit. This is a credit card program. If you read the actual contract, has the potential to become an open-ended multi-billion-dollar Bermuda Triangle of disappearing, untraceable cash used for any purpose, and it will give migrants up to $10,000 in taxpayer money with no ID checks. The restrictions, it's supposed to be used on fraud or whatever, but you're only signing a piece of paper. So I was just curious on everybody's thoughts on that. But basically, if more and more people adapt this rule, just another goddamn way where they can go ahead and continuously funnel money from the taxpayer. Now, the ways that I said today that you could fix some of this right off the bat, and if you see a politician talk about any of this, this is the guy you vote for. Number one, if you want to destroy super PACs, that means once again they can only get 15 to 20,000, and now you have a level playing field. A multi-billion-dollar corporation has no say than a citizen that has $15,000 to his name. Perfect. Destroy acceptance waiver and consents. We found out that fines are illegal, so what they did is created acceptance waivers and consents. This makes it no longer a fine, but considered a settlement. That means that any time these corporations are fined hundreds of millions of dollars, it is a tax write-off. And to show you the size of that, we showed you that when they got 25 billion in fines, 20 billion was written off in taxes. So taxpayers paid $20 billion of their penalties. Just to give you guys a rough reference to how much we're paying for their criminal activities. You ban politicians from insider trading, because if you take away their bribery, which we call super PACs and dark money, the next thing that they will do is say, all right, we will give you insider information because it's legal for politicians. So we will let you all become the next Nancy Pelosi, best traders in the business. So you stop all politicians from being able to insider trading along with their family members, because that's the next thing they do. If they're not the best trader, their brother is. You start at this point, everyone that does white collar crimes, you make them beyond a felony. You make them prison, no exceptions. You no longer allow pay a fine. And you no longer allow any of this. Like I said, white collar crime compared to a blue collar crime, you're stealing hundreds of millions, billions of dollars. Think about it. Let's say I stole $1 billion. How many workers, how many people work their entire lifetime to pay that off and won't ever get that money back? Their lives are ruined. They might lose their house. They might lose this and now have to work again at 70, 80 and can't. Like I said, you're destroying people's entire life and everything they've ever worked for. And you're doing it and not even feeling bad about it. Like I said, and I go, if white collar crime exceeds 100 million, execution, I don't care what people think, execution for a max, there's a reason I say for a max. You don't have to do that unless it's like, hey, you stole a fucking $1 billion and you're smiling. Otherwise, jail for life for a minimum. If you steal over $100 million, you should go to jail for life, no exceptions. Well, imagine if I went to a bank and stole $100 million. I would be in jail for the rest of my life. You go and you arrest Jamie Dimon, and you arrest every single fucking executive that works at JP Morgan, and you close JP Morgan down, because JP Morgan also funds more hedge funds than any bank in the entire United States, which would end all of that corruption as well. And then you go and you arrest Ken Griffin. And then you shut down market making and you get back to true supply and demand in the market. And there you go. You now have a fixed United States. All right. I got to get going though. Got the wifey's upstairs. She needs me for a little bit. So thank you guys for listening. I'm actually going to go live either, what day is it? Thursday? Thursday day? Yeah. So I'm either going to go live tomorrow morning or Sunday. I think I'm going to go live Sunday, but I'm going to go live with Peter Hahn again. I have a lot of questions I wanted to ask him I couldn't get to last time, but I'm going to go live again with Peter on Sunday. I'm planning for more for Sunday, but thank you guys for listening. Have a good day.